I'm Ryan Milliken from Hardway Performance, and you're listening to the Diesel Podcast.
I'm Dimitri Miller with No Zone Diesel.
This is Anthony Range from XDP.
This is Jaron Holder from Holderdown Performance.
Corey Willis from PPEI.
I'm Drew with D&J Precision Machine.
I'm Pinky.
And you're listening to the Diesel Podcast.
Diesel Podcast.
You're listening to the Diesel Podcast.
The Diesel Podcast.
The one and only Diesel Podcast.
What is going on, Diesel Nation? We've got a podcast today that touches on a question that pops up, I would say, almost every day. We get calls or emails about it, and that's, I'm in the market for a new truck or a newer truck. Which one should I go with? What are some things that separate the brands? What's the aftermarket availability look like? So we're going to chat with a guest today who went through that same process, and we're going to go through every angle of it and what went into his decision on whether to get a Power Stroke, Cummins, or Duramax. But before we do that, we've got to thank our sponsors who make this podcast possible. BD Diesel, they've got a ton of cool products and a lot of promotions going right now. And whether you got a Power Stroke, Cummins, Duramax, you need to go to dieselperformance.com, check out what they have, or call them at 800-887-5030. Now, for the Ford fans out there, Snyder Performance Engineering, they've got a ton of new things, really cool things like Minimax vent mounts. They've got the 5-position switch brackets, transmission turbo setups, pretty much everything. So if you've got a Power Stroke looking to make some improvements to it, or really any other make, let's go to spediesel.com. All right, let's get right into this podcast and touch on this topic of which truck to buy. Welcome to the podcast, Garen. How you been, buddy?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Patrick.
Yeah, it's been a long time, man. I know you've been busy up there in Alaska and stuff, and we've been busy down here and everything. And you're the guys on the podcast now, man. You're the one who started my addiction with diesels way back when.
It's bittersweet for sure, and a lot of money.
It's funny looking back, like this was probably like 04, 05, right around there. You picked up this 6-liter, it's a brand new truck, and I don't think either one of us really knew like what diesel performance was, but you get a magazine or jump on some forums and then be like, wow, this, adds this, and I just plug it in and all those different things. And that's what set me on the path, because that thing was a monster, man. Like 0 to 60, that thing would get up and move for as big of a truck as it was,
Yeah. Well, the funny part about it is I specifically remember you having your Dodge Hemi and me having my Dodge and us farting around and racing and whatever. And then I remember somebody telling me I can get a smoking deal on a Power Stroke. But, everywhere I went, I was getting just killed by Cummins, the 5.9s. They were smoky, they were loud, they were awesome. The thing is, I didn't know anyone that worked at Cummins. And, you and I were young men at that time. I think, 23, 24, I couldn't afford a $30,000 Cummins, so I went with the next best thing, the 6.0 Power Stroke.
Those were the days, man. I mean, I remember, even, it's kind of funny to reminisce for a second, but you look at truck prices now. I remember what they were in 04, 05. You could get a nice 5.9, quad cab, short bed, 4-wheel drive for $35,000, $37,000.
Oh yeah.
And now you can't touch it.
No, not even close. Not even close.
What was so cool about that truck and what we're going to be talking about on this podcast is, you get into a vehicle, most of us get into it when we're younger, and, you buy what you can afford, and then you kind of just jump into it. And I remember helping you on that truck with an intercooler and, an intake manifold and all those different things that you did. And then I started to get more interested in it. And then, that story, that dyno story that we always have.
Well, the Power Stroke for sure. What did we start with? We started with, the programmer. And if I remember correctly, the big three was Super Chips, Edge, and Bully Dog. That was it. And you either had one of the three. And, I remember us, not really knowing what we were doing, hooking up the, Edge, and okay, that kind of works. So, man, this thing is the fastest thing ever. And then, we upgraded. Now we did an air intake, you and I. And then we, did the intercooler, which, led to, fuel systems, which, led to straight piping. And, it was a really good learning tool, I think, for both of us. And you know, at the end there, remember, did the EGR delete, and we actually finally got our first puff of black diesel smoke.
Those are the old days, man. Like,
Yeah, it was.
Man, that was more than 10 years ago. But yeah, I remember that stuff. And I had the itch for like 3 years to get one, to get a diesel. And, you know, I don't know. I just got, you know, into a position and a time when I could do it, when I could afford it. And I remember, I remember Garen talking about Cummins motors, and that's all I focused on. And at that time, what was on the lots were 6.7s, so that's what I got. And I remember, like, I excitedly, like, I think I, like, texted you a picture of it, and you're like, damn it, you know, and I don't know how much longer after that, but then you had one, and it wasn't like, oh, well, we're competitive. It wasn't like, oh, well, we both have one. It was, well, I've got a tuner on it, and I've got, you know, these Dynamite diesel nozzles and all this stuff, and I'm like, oh, man, we're both going to go broke trying to compete with each other.
Well, I mean, even if we back it up, once we had all that stuff on, remember, like, Banks told us with the intercooler we get 100 horsepower, and with Edge we get 150 horsepower, and, you know, the straight pipe has to be at least 50, and we start adding all that up, and like, oh, God, we have a 500 horsepower truck. And then we went to that dyno meet, and we dynoed 250 horsepower at the rear wheels or something. Like, I've never felt more defeated in my entire life than at that moment.
I remember that vividly. It was like this, you know, big event, and, you know, it was like a power stroke group or something. And there were 7.3s and 6 liters. I think the 6.4s were just coming out then, and they had some of them there. That was cool, man. But I remember that 6.7, I think that's where we got to have, you know, fun with it. And just, you know, I knew a little bit about power strokes from the truck you had, and then I went to Dodge, you know, and that I loved that motor and, you know, that setup and everything. And, you know, I remember you getting, you know, like those early days, it was kind of like you had to have these 2 different things on there, and there'd be the lightning bolt, and, you know, this pop up, and, you know, it's like, this worked on a 5.9, will it work on a 6.7? And it just progressed so much pretty fast.
Oh, yeah, you know, I mean, that 6.7, I mean, even when you go back to the 5.9s, it's a bulletproof motor. You can, you know, the Dodge, the motor is, you're not buying a Dodge to have a transmission or the truck. You're buying the Dodge to get the Cummins motor because it's literally bulletproof. But the problem is everything else around it falls apart. When that 6.7 came out, I mean, you know, they were meeting 2020 EPA regulations by, you know, increasing the size of the displacement. But the problem is that motor and EGR and emissions was so far ahead of the time. Like, when you bought yours, I bought mine, but there was no real programmer. There was no real EGR deletes, DPF deletes. And so I remember spending gobs of money just to drive the truck and have it straight piped, you know. Like, it was terrible. I had, like, an Edge with Bully Dog, and, you know, I was still throwing lightning bolts. I'd just be driving down the street, and my truck would just stop, turn itself off, lightning bolt to death, you know. I mean, what a pain in the butt.
You know, I had a lot of problems with my truck with, like, the O2 sensors, and mostly just the O2 sensors. And I know, you know, a lot of people in those early, like that 2007 and a half, 2008, they would have different electrical things because they were still trying to figure that all out. And they have, all 3 brands have made, like, tremendous strides in, you know, getting that stuff more reliable. Yeah. But, you know, you're right, like, you don't buy that truck, at least that 3rd gen style. You don't buy that truck because of the interior. Like, I mean, it was very basic. Especially compared to, like, a Duramax or, you know, a Power Stroke, is they were ahead of it.
Way ahead of it, yeah. Like, I think I had that, Dodge SLT. It might as well have been a work truck, you know. I mean, I was lucky, you know. I think within 50,000 miles I had already worn a hole in the seat, you know. I mean, there's a lot of creature comforts that just weren't there in the Dodges. Yeah.
Yeah, and then, you know, after that, I wanted to change. I wanted to drive something different, and I got an LMM. And it was just so nice, like, the interior, how it drove. I mean,
Yeah.
just everything on it. And I remember telling you, and it kind of started this whole conversation that we're having now is, you were just recently in the market for a truck, and you'd had a Ford, you'd had, a Ram, and, what went into your decision making when you were looking at what truck do I want to have?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, really, I always just still wanted to beat Patrick. I put all my money in my Cummins, and, I thought it was fast, and then I came and visited you, and you're running all of Patrick's goodies, big turbo, big injectors, $10,000 ATS transmission. And I thought, well, Patrick's telling me he's got an 800 horsepower truck. It can't be that fast. And when you let me drive that, I've never screamed louder as a woman than driving that thing. And then I realized that, 800 horsepower, that's too much for me, actually. When I always was trying to soup up my Cummins, it was to beat Patrick, and I needed at least 801 horsepower. But after driving that, I realized I want nothing to do with that because it is the fastest thing on four wheels. That was insane. And, I knew that you put a lot into that truck. I mean, you literally had everything, and that thing was absolutely bulletproof. But, like you were kind of saying, I wanted those creature comforts. And my Cummins just didn't have it. And I didn't want to start with another Cummins, because I knew that once I put a programmer on a new Cummins with some of those creature comforts, I'm going to have to upgrade the transmission. You start adding all these things in. And on top of that, my Dodge drove nice, but it was still a tank, You're driving along on the road, and you hit that bridge intersection. It literally feels like, you're jarring your feelings out. And, and Power Stroke's the same. They have those coil springs up front, big differentials, and I wanted something that rode a little bit nicer. But on top of that, I now had a realistic number. I didn't want an 800 horsepower truck. I just want somewhere in between the 500 and 600 horsepower. And when you look at all the platforms, the Power Stroke, the Cummins, the Duramax, the new LMLs, and now, the newer LP5s, well, the Duramax has it. It has the really nice creature comforts. I can throw just a tuner on there, upgrade from the CP4 to a CP3. It has amazing injectors. The turbo lasts, and, it has the Allison transmission. So I can spend the least amount. I can do the least amount of upgrades and have an efficient truck that's reliable, and I don't have to spend $10,000 on a race transmission, And so that's kind of how I got to the LML. But, I've literally probably been, waiting for someone to tune these LP5s, but it's looking like, it's never going to happen because, the emission standards and the computer on there, you just can't flash it, And living in Alaska, now I'm going to have to buy one other thing is that high idle kit that BD offers for my LML, which I definitely need living in a cold climate,
Yeah. BD's they've got a ton of cool products for all three platforms. From the intercooler you had on your 6.7 Cummins, and
that thing was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, from that electronics, they've got just a ton of cool things, and what's so exciting about the LMLs is it has the transmission, and it's a proven platform. And if you do want to build it one day, there's tons of products. There's torque converters and rebuild kits and full transmissions, or you mentioned the CP3 conversion or compound turbo kits. All those things are there, and you also have the electronic side. Where there's proven tuners, that are out there.
Oh yeah, and with that Cummins that I had the Smarty. As years goes on, it starts to, electronics start to change, and luckily you far surpassed me on that one and told me, Darren, you got to get EFI Live. You can program it exactly. you have 90 horsepower injectors, you have a S475, like we can program it all, to specifically to your truck. And I mean that, holy smokes, that was day and night difference. Because with the Smarty, all I was doing was flipping gears and blowing black smoke, literally blowing, just rolling coal. Whereas the EFI Live, now I could tow, I could drive the streets, I could get great fuel economy, or I could, bump it up, and yeah, I could now blow raw diesel out my exhaust if I wanted to,
That's, it fits all in too, like, when you first get into these motors, it's like, we think back to like the 12 valves, 7.3s and just how smoky they were. But you're right. Like you go through that process where you're like, okay, I hit the same thing, like riding in a 1,200 horsepower truck or 1,600 horsepower truck is like, I want nothing to do with this. It's cool to watch, but I have no use for it. And
Right.
even at 800, you can have something, efficient and fun to drive, but
Oh, yeah.
like that 550, 600, maybe 650 mark, it's, quiet, it's efficient, you can still tow with it. That figures into everything once you have a couple trucks or something like that, or start to get to be old dudes like us,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Did you check out the new Power Strokes? Go test drive any of them?
I've looked at it, and the Power Strokes are great. But the reason I ended up going with that LML is kind of just what we were talking about, creature comforts. Granted, the Power Stroke has all those, but I wanted the IFS. I wanted the independent front suspension from the LML, just Chevys in general. But something that kind of turned me off on the Power Stroke was I'm not a fan of having two turbos. It seems like it's, one extra turbo to go wrong, I don't know, and, you can have a Ford, and it can be super fast. You can have a Dodge, it's super fast, and a Duramax. It's all, I think, just what you like. Yeah,
definitely. I know there were some growing pains, like with the 6.4s and the sequential turbo setup, and things like that. And then that dual compressor wheel they had, like on the early 6.7s, and I think in 15 they changed it up a little bit. And I mean, they've got bulletproof transmissions. I really like that truck, but we get calls all the time or emails, from guys who listen, and they're, in the market, which one's the best. And, it depends how you want to use it. If you want like an all-out race truck, there's 48 RE Swap It, and a lot of the parts carry over from, the earlier 6.7s and everything like that. But, I guess it depends on the perspective. If you're trying for a race truck, they're all going to cost the same amount of money. It's just when you buy what. But, then it kind of gets more personal, and you're like, okay, go sit in the driver's seat. How do you like it? How do you like how it looks? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm, and the new Power Stroke just hasn't grown on me yet. I'm, you got diehard Ford guys, and, that's awesome, but it's just the front end. It just, the big long lights, it's just a little bit of everything, It's the same reason I didn't go with the LP5. It's because, their emissions right now is uncrackable. So, that's not very much fun at all, whereas, I think here in too long, Power Strokes and Cummins are going to be the same way, because Duramax is kind of leading the way with emission stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be something on some future episodes. Definitely want to get, some guys on who do that for a living, who tune those trucks and see what they think. And once one does it, the other, brands start to do it as well. And it's very much a evolving, kind of performance market. But I'm excited you got that LML, man. You'll have fun with it. And there's so many things if you want to do, from compound turbo kits and air dog or fast lift pump and this CP3 conversion, and just so much you can do if you want to.
Yeah, and that literally once I get this paid down a little bit, that's, you just kind of basically named my list of exhaust intake, a faster air dog, EFI Live, and I still am trying to get educated, you can call it, on the EFI link, right? Is that right?
The Easy Link.
Yeah, the Easy Link. So, and you've always steered me in the right direction, and then, of course, deletes, and I think, after all the research I've done, that should put me, with a CP3, easily in the 500s. I'll be hitting that top portion of the stock turbo, but it sets me up, just like you kind of said, for, if I start driving that around and 500 doesn't feel like it's enough, then I can always come back and, maybe go to a big single or something, and still be very streetable and drivable.
It's real interesting, like the EFI Live Easy Link. PPEI is a company we work closely with, and they sponsor this podcast. They make it happen. I've known those guys for years, and they use both, and it's really interesting to see, like with Easy Link, just how simple it is, and how updates are easy, and how, the tuner can access it easily if you make changes or, add a part or something like that. And then EFI Live is great in what it does, and how simple it is and how proven it is. And, the question that pops up all the time is which one makes more power? Well, you can't say that. It's just like basically two different ways to make a truck perform better. So yeah, when you get to that point, we can talk about it and get you in touch with the right guys and everything, and you'll have fun with it.
Oh yeah, I know.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's great to catch up, and like people they always want to know what's the best truck, or they're in your position where they've had one or two, and they're looking for information. It's not like you can really call up a place and say, hey, which truck is the best, or which one would you get? You call a Ford dealer, they're not going to tell you to go buy a Ram or a Chevrolet. So knowledge is invaluable.
Oh yeah, it really is. And it's guys like you that I have the ability to call and be like, Patrick, this is what I have as far as a budget, and maybe I haven't bought the truck, or maybe I already have a truck in mind, but being able to call you and be like, hey, I got a budget of this much. I want the most reliable horsepower without blowing anything up, and I want to be able to be one of the GT Mustangs, And it's awesome that you can steer us in the right direction because, you and I have both experienced, that like never-ending, dropping of money into a truck, and really we're just defeating the purpose. We could have just bought, your simple block-off plates for EGR, a big turbo, some fuel and tuning, and we would have been super happy, but there was no one out there to really guide us and, what to get,
Yeah, you can very easily waste a lot of money, hundreds or even thousands of dollars. But some of the horror stories I've heard of things, where I'm like, oh man, and I feel bad. I do because money it's tight. It's not fun having like 3 boxes of 3 different parts you bought, and none of them are on the truck because you went. Now you're onto the 4th thing. It's horrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, no, it is great to get your insights on buying a truck and how your passion for this all started. And yeah, when you get closer, just give me a shout. We'll chat about setups and parts and new things that have come up, that are available for them, and make sure you're taken care of.
I appreciate it, Patrick.
Remember, diesel fans, check out BD Diesel. Just go to dieselperformance.com and Snyder Engineering for a ton of cool products for your truck. If you guys have any questions about, which truck should I buy? What are some proven ways that, people have modified them or gotten more power out of them, gotten more efficiency? Just drop a line on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and we'll make sure and answer them. If you want to call us, you can. Number's 888-556-0743. We're more than happy to chat with you. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.